Hello, my name is Michael Chisnievsky, and I'm a professor in English at Missouri State University and the editor-in-chief of Moon City Review and an editor with Moon City Press. Welcome to our second installment of the MA Thesis Reading in Creative Writing at Missouri State. Last year, our first event was such a great success that we decided to do it again. This time, of course, it's recorded and on video for you here. So we're just really happy that you came out and you're watching this video. I'm really, really happy to be here to be announcing these three students who I've worked with for the last couple of years, some of them even longer as undergrads, as they've really compiled an impressive resume of hard work, creativity, and just general brilliance. And it's been my pleasure to have them in class, to work with them at Moon City Press, and to just in general get to know them these last several years. We have three students reading today. I'm going to read from you their bios. We have Amelia Fisher, who is graduating from Missouri State University with an MA in English. She was the winner of this year's student nonfiction and poetry competitions, both of them. Next up will be Sarah Parris, who is graduating with her MA in the creative writing track. She writes fantasy with a queer and feminist focus. She plans to publish both her solo series, Tales of Erath, and a series co-written with her friend Rachel, The Rise of the Wild, in the next couple of years. And finally, we'll have Amanda Hadlock, who has been a graduate assistant in our English department. She recently accepted a graduate assistantship in the MFA program at Florida State University, which she will be fulfilling for the next 3 years. Her writing has appeared in journals such as Hobart, Wigleaf, and the Florida Review, among others. So please help me in welcoming all three of these really wonderful writers and congratulating them on such a wonderful achievement in graduating and completing their thesis and passing their comps and just being great Missouri State Bears.
I'm going to start with some poetry. This one's called Columbine. I watch as it unfolds. Petals welcome hummingbirds, and they drink from its perennial pool, a fountain of youth. The seeds of Columbine flowers spread themselves. A tornado of germs travels outside our mountain-bound community, through the valleys and river rapids. My neighbor knocks on my door and mentions her nightmares, how the unfettered flowers whisper warnings into reality, and that's how she knew to keep her children home that day. I imagine her watching the news as a busty blonde spins stories about the trenchcoat mafia casting spells to protect their families. Walk up, not out. But if the mountains cannot stop them, then how can I? Does she believe in miracles? But before I can ask, she thanks God for the softness of flowers in a world of steel-toed boots. This next one is called Star Signs. The sun rises on my drive to work, and I blush along when my regular comes in. I make her latte exactly right. My fingers smooth the grounds and test the milk. I undercharge. It's a miracle I make it at 6. I don't believe anyone looks twice at my undone face or apron-covered tits. On my days off from being a deli girl, I shave my legs, take boiling baths, but I still get sticky from smoking wax. There are dishes every day, an excuse to get away from unwanted questions. What's wrong? What do you have that's gluten-free? I'm just too busy to answer the phone. Let me make my money and go. Boys hurl slurs from car windows. I flip them off, and it feels good, though not as good as pressing my foot down as far as it will go to see what happens. I wonder if any of it's worth it when my uncle visits and complains. Mandatory sexual harassment training at his new job. I've had to file 2 complaints in a year at one of mine. It's hard to get by. The grocery bills are high, so I go without eating until a student brings me an apple. I've learned to love how it tears at my gums and sticks between my teeth. I make sure to only consume it with water after an old friend told me fruit ferments in your stomach if it's too full. My uncle lives in Thailand. He said to me as a kid, the reason I want to explore like him is because both of our sons are in Aquarius. Now he just PayPals me. Maybe I can save up enough and use my change from the tip jar to visit Thailand. I've always wondered about its sunrise. And this next poem is actually an imitation poem after the writer Shen Shen, and it's called The Enchanted Forest. The gift was left on my welcome mat like a borrowed tool returned by my neighbor who hated small talk but loved to jump on trampolines with me. Upon inspection, it was a glass bottle of syrup wrapped in a bow. It came with a tag that read, "Just drink me for the love of God." It could have been a trick. My neighbor peered through the curtains with wondering eyes that encouraged me to choose. It burned going down. I found myself in the woods where I hid as a child, but this time I came across a hole in a tree trunk, and boy, when I climbed in, the same world but sandpapered surrounded me, where women had been presidents and there's money in the bank. So throw away your security system, my neighbor, and here, take this gift. It will replace uncertainty with embers better than any self-help book or fad diet ever could. Just believe me when I say you'll be thankful for the fear, as life here is sweet, sweet, sweet. And this last piece I'm going to read is a piece of short fiction, and it is the title story of my thesis, and it is called Brilliant Women. Caroline gave me her soul for a couple of reasons. One, she owed me. Two, she wanted to be a pioneer, and we were on the brink of a scientific revolution that would change everything. From religion to medicine to our own mortality. She had spent most of her last few conscious weeks testing and tweaking the formula. It's what allowed us to locate souls and extract them. It was a tedious, demanding process. We needed resources even after withdrawing our savings accounts and investments. So we fundraised door to door like little boys and girls, looking as helpless as possible as we asked strangers for their support. We never told them we were the scientists because we didn't feel like getting repeatedly rejected. We had done all the work we could without an actual soul for experimentation, which limited us at first. But it was during this time when we discovered that every animal has a soul. We hooked up Caroline's golden retriever, and the soul scan lit up like a Christmas tree, which wasn't nearly as surprising as the fruit fly analysis. We didn't expect to find anything worth noting in their cells, but our hypothesis was wrong. Caroline was especially quiet for the rest of the day. If all animals had souls, even the microscopic, annoying kind, which was the tale our research was telling, then what does that mean for us? What about bacteria? She asked after the fruit flies. I don't know, I lied. I didn't have the guts to acknowledge what our results were pointing to. Anything with DNA has a soul as desperate and precious as our own. Maybe that's why she was so ready to give hers up when the time came. We probably wouldn't have been friends if we hadn't met in the dorms during undergrad. She was everything I wasn't, soft, shy. She never talked in class but knew all the answers, not because she didn't want the credit, but because silence was all her parents and their church taught daughters about. We both worked hard and made a great team. Boys and professors no longer overlooked Caroline, thanks to me, and she promised she'd never forget what I'd done for her. She promised she'd repay me. It was during our first molecular biology lab together when she told me about soul searching, her passion project. Sounds like a new workout trend, I said, as I swirled the blue liquid around a glass beaker, and Caroline adjusted her safety goggles. She looked like a bug. Believe me, there's no exercise equipment involved. She went on to explain this theory of hers that tackled the questions other scientists had been too scared to ask. Something like a soul must exist, she said. There must be more to us than meat and electricity. Of course, Caroline was right all along, but she had no idea just how right she would be. Souls are tangible and can be unraveled like thread on a spool, and I was ready to start collecting and comparing samples from different species. But I hurt her feelings when I laughed after she claimed it wouldn't feel right to play God like that. I couldn't help it. There we were, calculating the body to soul ratio, blurring the boundary between physical science and metaphysics, and my research partner was worried about extraterrestrial consequences. I missed Caroline once she was gone, despite my desire to hold a soul with my own two hands and present it at international conferences like some sort of zoo animal. But we held tightly onto our belief that if one could extract a soul from a body, then one could install a soul into a body as well. So we kept Caroline alive on a breathing machine. Though she was just a vegetable, I rolled my squeaky stool over to her and gave her a rundown of the results after each experiment. After synthesizing the data I gathered over a period of 120 hours, I have concluded that human souls do not sleep. At first, Caroline's soul was the color of the sky right before the sun sets completely. Maybe more like a pair of jeans or a handful of globe thistles. It pulsed like a beating heart, twitched like a hooked fish. I was afraid to touch the slippery sheen that protected its insides from predators like me. After 5 days of observation, though, Caroline's soul no longer squirmed or throbbed, and its color dulled from a complex indigo to a matte black. As it cowered in the back corner of its cage and shivered as if our lab was some sort of pound, I tried to soothe it by playing Frank Sinatra, Caroline's favorite. He was a wife-beater, I told her, as we folded clothes that weren't quite dry at the laundromat. I was never a fan. You're the one with the Tupac poster on your wall. So? He raped a girl, she said with a shrug. How did she know that? I didn't know what to say, and for some reason my feelings were hurt. I took the poster down. You're only mad because it's more comfortable than being wrong. But not even old Blue Eyes could put the pep back in Caroline's soul's step. It appears that the soul only has one state of consciousness. Though our body needs rest, our soul seems to need something else. I will report back when I figure out what that is. I retreated to Caroline's caged soul after reviewing my notes and cleaning up our workspace. It was starting to feel more like Caroline than her useless body did. That was the first time I talked to it. What is it you need? The soul said nothing, of course. It just kept quivering in the corner. I was compelled to unlock the door and cradle it, but I knew any sort of physical contact with the mysterious ectoplasm could be dangerous. Not only could it kill, but my touch would compromise all the work I'd done, all the work we'd done. Now it was my job to figure it out, to save the soul of this brilliant woman. Thank you.
Hey, I'm Sarah. My thesis is a young adult fantasy, kind of a portal fantasy. This girl gets sucked into this fantasy world from our world and finds out that there is this prophecy about her. I'm doing a chosen one thing, but trying to see if I can make the chosen one, different or new somehow. I'm kind of playing around with that idea. What I'm going to read is not about her, but about one of the friends and helpers that she finds along the way. He's a scholar and an archivist named Treth. This is the chapter where you meet him, and he is researching this prophecy in the library. It probably won't make a lot of sense out of context, but it's a part of the story that I really like, and I hope you like it too. Chapter 2. Grimoires and scrolls lay scattered across the worn table, half buried beneath journals, books, and essays. Parchments were piled high, drawings of alchemical circles and translations, weaving a secret story amongst themselves. A porcelain cup of lemon tea, long gone cold, served as a paperweight to what may have been a line of ancient poetry, and the golden light of the setting sun was the only indicator of hours past. Mechanically, Treth reached for a tattered book from atop a tier of volumes, and studied it yet again through bleary eyes. Every piece of information he'd gathered had led him time and time again to this tome, and still he couldn't understand. Yet there had to be something here. Surely he'd seen something. His eyes began to sting, and he closed them, leaning back in his chair. Somewhere among the papers and parchments there was another document he remembered seeing hours before. Hair hung loose over his ear as he thought. He recounted his steps mentally, searching through the papers at hand, and sighed. There weren't so many. He rubbed his eyes and retied the ribbon holding his hair back before shifting a pile of alchemical diagrams and a grimoire disguised as a cookbook onto the chair beside him, which already groaned under the weight of books on prophecy and the theory thereof. He scanned the desk again. There! He pulled the document from beneath his own leather-bound journal. The passage was written in an antiquated form of Pixie, not his most fluent language, but with some scrutiny he'd been able to decipher it. The Linrel falls to Lanus. Guideless, Balin resumes in cycle forth. Victor Balrock soars again. From what Treth could make out of his rough translations, this woman, Tierel Throj, had declared nearly 800 years ago that a woman capable of changing the world would come into their midst at the end of the third cycle, which was due to end in a short 8 months. If she hadn't arrived already, she soon would, if the prophecy was to be believed. Balin was the first goddess of the Arch Triumvirate. She and her sisters, Eo and Zemla, created the world according to Anthene mythology, and now each of them took turns ruling it in 900-year cycles. Zemla's reign was nearing its end, and next year Balin would assume her throne for the fourth cycle. But what prompted this prophecy to be created in the first place? What could threaten Balin's place on the throne? Was it all just a metaphor? He knew Balin was also the name of a mythical tyrant queen who was said to have eyes in all birds. Perhaps this guide was meant to put an end to a similar figure's reign. Well, this would be about the right time for it, what with the queen passing another horrid decree nearly every week. The capital hadn't felt right in years. Every day it seemed the city slipped further out of balance. It certainly wasn't the city it had been even a decade before. Something in the air had changed, something in the faces of the people and the tenor of their voices. He rescued his quill from its precarious position atop a pyramid of scrolls and began scribbling into his journal, then stood to pull yet another volume from the library's many shelves. Unlike so many of the others, this one didn't take much searching. Null Knows All, Prophecies, was a hefty, tattered, onion-skin affair which was reassuring. In Treth's experience, the most helpful of books seemed to come in the same condition. He flipped to the tea section. Lady Throj was listed, along with the most famous of her divinations. According to this, Throj was known for being a bit batty, something that could prove problematic, as prophecies were infamous for being vague in the first place. He continued to read as he walked back to his laden table and sat, taking another chilly sip of lemon tea. At the bottom of the next page was the object of his interest, translated into modern Anthenian, along with the ramblings of some scholar or another, who was evidently praised as an expert in pixie lore and religion. Treth very much doubted this, as pixies were known to be recalcitrant and fractious even on their good days. Anything this man knew was no doubt riddled with half-truths, something pixies widely regarded as a good joke. His translation of the prophecy read, "The ocean spirit rides in godfire. As the third cycle ends, the phoenix flies again."
For centuries it has been widely believed that the mythical creatures Linril and Phoenix were mortal enemies. However, if we take into account the pixie belief in metaphysical duality, see Chapter 6, then we can posit that the Linril was just as much a symbol for Balin as the Phoenix was. Tress shook his head at the quote. That didn't make sense. Balin was the Anthene goddess of fire and war, and the Balrog, or Phoenix, was her familiar. That much was obvious. No matter the mythology, the goddess of fire wouldn't be represented by the Linril, the serpent guardian of the seas. But why would the Balrog concern itself with the Linril? Who was it meant to represent? Certainly not Eo, the goddess of air and joy, nor Zemla, the goddess of earth and steadfastness. But who besides her sisters had the power to challenge Balin? Sir? Tress looked up, irritation flashing in his violet eyes. The girl before him looked timid, but continued. I'm sorry to disturb you, but it's nearly dark and we have to close. She looked nervous, like she was afraid of being shouted at. He expelled his frustration in a tiny sigh and smiled. He hadn't meant to scare the poor girl. Ah, yes, of course. My apologies. The girl relaxed. You can come back tomorrow if you like. I can save this table for you. Thank you, but it isn't necessary. I've got what I need, he said, gesturing to his journal. He took another glance over the table and its many towers, then to the slight girl before him. I'll just need a moment. The girl smiled gently. Of course. When she was gone, he hastily sorted through the books he'd discarded and those he was still using, until he had 4 sitting by his journal and a scroll, the essentials of his research. Satisfied, he picked them up and made his way through the empty library. His steps echoed through the cavernous atrium of the main entry. Brilliant orange sunshine spilled through the 2-story windows all around. He checked out the materials he'd chosen and stepped outside into a world bathed in the light of a sinking sun. Few people were out at this hour, something he attributed to most shops closing with the sunset. He always found it a pleasure to be out, however, without horses and carriages and peddlers making a ruckus at him. The warm spring air crept up his coat sleeves and into his hair. Goosebumps rose across the base of his neck and disappeared just as quickly. A few men in rich clothes strode out of the yellow stone bank across the way and cast him a curious look before one nodded good-naturedly, and they continued on their business. Tress nodded in return and walked on. He watched his shoes as they clacked against the street and let his mind wander with the wind as it meandered through the nooks and crannies of the buildings around him. A thought came to him then, but not his own. This was of trees, of worms, and of searching. Tress smiled. Rafe's check-ins were like clockwork. He could sense the movement of Rafe's wings in the periphery of the vision and knew that he must be flying. He mentally acknowledged that he was listening and beckoned for Rafe to go on. In return, Rafe sent an image of a wide forest stretching out before him and only a few miles behind him, indicating that there was still much distance to cover in his search. Tress nodded and sent feelings of warmth and love through the connection. They would be together again soon, he promised, as soon as they found the guide. Rafe accepted this and sent a final image of a meaty rabbit leg before he dropped the connection. Tress couldn't help but laugh to himself. If he actually managed to do it, the old bird could have a whole rabbit if he wanted. He'd have earned it. Presently, Tress came out to a plainer part of the city. Here the buildings were a mix of wood and gray stone, sturdy, stout, and homey, made for function rather than fashion. Street merchants and stray cats were plenty, and children and dogs played in the alleyways. When he came to a familiar cafe, he stopped and looked about. Across the street, at the end of a line of cheery townhouses, stood Cloves Inn, a charming two-story building with flowers spilling from window planters and smoke drifting from the chimney. The image of a porcupine was branded into the wooden sign hanging over the door, the spirit creature of Aden, the goddess of travel. Relieved, Treth crossed the street, wanting nothing more than a nice meal and a comfortable bed. So, from there, Treth and my main character, Al, meet and figure out the prophecy together, with a couple of other characters, including Rafe, which is Treth's familiar. And that is about, I guess that's about it. Thanks for listening.
Hi everyone, I'm Amanda. Before I read some of my writing for you all, I just wanted to say thank you to the English department, the College of Arts and Letters, and especially everyone at Moon City Press for making this happen. Obviously, I wish the circumstances were different, but I'm still incredibly grateful that this is happening and that I get to be a part of this reading. Thanks for listening. Okay, so today I'm going to read 2 flash fiction pieces from my thesis project for you. You might have heard some earlier iterations of these if you attended the readings that Mike Chisniewski's publications class put on last fall. So if you've heard an earlier version, sorry, but I felt like these were the best 2 pieces for reading out loud. Okay, so this first one is titled Emasculatum. The other kids in the trailer park like to play in the empty lot on Saxon Street. They like tag, kickball, or digging up worms, but I don't get invited often, unless it's by Bobby. But it doesn't bother me too much. Grandma says the other kids are just jealous because I'm so smart. Tomorrow is my 13th birthday. Grandma's picking up ice cream from the Dollar General. Mint chip, my favorite and her least. She says it tastes too much like menthol cigarettes. I wouldn't know. I only ever smoked a nasty non-menthol with Bobby next door. Ugh, never again. I nearly hacked up a lung coughing. I don't know how Grandma smokes those things one after another. L&M are her favorite because they're the cheapest. She always stinks like them too. No wonder none of her dates ever come around a second time. Grandma says Bobby is bad news and I shouldn't give him the time of day, but friends are few and far between when you're a scrawny girl with glasses and a dead mom and a daddy in jail. And Grandma says a lot of things. She says her body is screaming, but because she takes these little pills, her brain can't hear it. Fibromyalgia is a bitch, she says. But I'm cautious when she uses that word, bitch, because she uses it to describe my dead mom, too. Mom and Dad met in a halfway house, and I was born a year later. Grandma says she never liked my mom, since she was trouble from the start. But at least I came out of it, she says, and then she pinches my cheeks till it hurts. Mom died when I was in 4th grade. She took too many muscle relaxers and choked on her own puke in her sleep. When I tell this story to the other kids at school, they look at me funny, like I have a big booger on my face or something. But I'm used to the funny looks by now. Grandma doesn't goof off much, but when she does, it usually involves Dolly Parton. Grandma loves Dolly. She loves putting on her blonde wig and singing 9 to 5, and her gravelly, off-key voice. She says it reminds her when she worked as a secretary for that hotshot doctor in Gainesville. But then the doctor got smart with her, and when Grandma told the doctor's wife, she wasn't working there much longer. Should have kept my damn mouth shut, she says. The doctor's wife hated her for that. The story doesn't make sense to me. Shouldn't she have been mad at her husband? I don't know, men are weird. Like how in his last letter, my dad wrote how he'd hung up my school photo in his cell, and the other inmates asked if I was his girlfriend. No, he said, that's my daughter, and they laughed. For some reason this made my dad feel proud, which I found weird. Oh well, at least someone thinks I'm pretty, even if it's a bunch of creepy lockups. Grandma got me a part-time job for the summer. I castrate cows. The big tool we use to crush their balls is called an emasculatum. It kind of looks like a big pair of pliers, but rounded at the end where their junk goes. We're humane cow castrators, according to my boss, Mr. Wayne. We don't snip the balls clean off, just crush. It's bloodless. And Mr. Wayne pays me in cash, so I don't have to pay taxes, which is pretty humane if you ask me. I show up at 6 a.m. every day and get to work. It's a 4-hour shift, so Grandma picks me up in time for us to go home so I can make her breakfast. She likes oatmeal and peanut butter. She says it's the only thing that doesn't flare up her acid reflux these days. Last week, Grandma had to slather my hair with mayonnaise to kill the lice again. It's funny, mayonnaise tastes so good on sandwiches, but smells awful when it's in my hair. She says I keep picking up lice from running around in all the tall grass while I'm at work. The lice hop out and hitch a ride on my long brown locks. I'm not sure why she's so mad about it, since she's the one who made me get the stupid job in the first place. But when I brought that up, she just looked at me all angry. So I shut up, and I never brought it up again. Grandma's getting impatient with me. I can feel it. This is the 3rd time we've done the mayonnaise thing. Waste of perfectly good mayonnaise, she says around her cigarette every time. Since my dad got busted for possession again, I mainly talk to him through the letters we send. I like to draw on the envelopes. Last time, I turned it into a crew of cows peering out over a barbed wire fence. I wrote all about my job emasculating cows, and my upcoming 13th birthday, and the mayonnaise, and when my dad wrote back, he told me he was proud of me, his working girl, his resilient girl, he called me. Getting so old so fast. The letter made me so happy I hung it up on the wall by the bed I share with Grandma. I read it to myself every night before I fall asleep, while Grandma mumbles her prayers beside me. And then I wake up for work in the morning and do it all over again. Okay, thank you. And then the second piece is entitled Second Body. The second dead body I found belonged to one of my mom's boyfriends, Sam. We kicked in the door when he wouldn't answer his phone this one weekend. We found him slumped over his computer desk, eyes half open, mouth slack. He had swallowed a fistful of Xanax with some whiskey. That'll do the trick. He lived in his mother, Helen's, garage. She clasped her hands over my eyes when we walked in and saw him. Her cane with the tennis ball on the bottom fell to the ground. But she was too late. I had seen the lazy purple tongue hanging from his mouth, the tongue which used to help him slur, "Hey Daniel, how you doing?" when Mom made me visit. I would sit inside and play flash games on Sam's computer, and Mom would sometimes yell for me to fetch them fresh beers from the mini fridge. I would pause my game and run their Coors or Bud Light to where they would sit in their lawn chairs in Helen's driveway and watch cars pass by. We spent about a year that way. I was in 6th grade. I'm in 7th now. After the ambulance came and took Sam's body, and Helen went wherever she went, Mom told me to take Sam's computer. I felt weird about it, like I didn't have a right to it, but she insisted. "Come on," she said, "we need one, and he would want you to have it." So I unplugged and rolled up all the cords, wiped everything off with a Clorox wipe, and packed it all up in a Walmart sack. Mom hauled out the tower, then the monitor, and stuffed them in the trunk of her shitty red Saturn, and I thought about what it must have sounded like when Sam died and his head crashed onto the keyboard. Okay, well, that's all I have to read for you today. Thanks again for listening to me and having me as a part of this reading. And yeah, thanks.